Why was her heartbeat louder than the helicopter blades? Lieutenant Commander Maya Reeves didn't know anymore. Maybe because she understood better than anyone what waited for her at the bridge. A bomb, smart, cruel, deliberate. And somewhere beneath the noise, a clock that had already started counting down. The call had come before sunrise. She'd been finishing her morning run on the shoreline, salt air in her lungs, mind clear, when the phone on her hip erupted with the one tone every Navy EOD tech dreaded. Active threat. Immediate response. She stopped mid-stride, breath fogging in the cool air, watching the ocean glow faintly pink with dawn. The voice on the other end was calm, official, the kind that never wasted words. Lieutenant Commander Reeves, credible explosive threat at bridge, possible mass casualty device. You're the closest with clearance for this threat level. Extraction inbound. She didn't hesitate. She never did. Within minutes she was back in her quarters, dropping her running gear and grabbing the heavy black EOD bag that never left her door. Tools, probes, cutters, sensors, her version of armor. Now 12 minutes later she was strapped into a Navy MH-60, racing north along the coastline. Beneath her boots the floor vibrated with turbine growl. Outside, sunlight bled across the horizon, washing the world in a pale, nervous gold. Maya Reeves, 29 years old, 7 years in the service, 47 confirmed diffusions. Every one of them different, every one of them a conversation with death. But this felt personal. She scrolled through the images sent to her tablet. High-resolution shots from the maintenance crew's inspection drone. A cluster of military-grade C4 molded around a bridge support beam. Pressure sensors, tilt switches, digital timer counting down from 18 minutes. Her stomach turned. The design wasn't just sophisticated, it was familiar. The exact symmetry of the circuits, the layered redundancy of triggers, it was a signature. And Maya had seen that signature before. 2 years earlier, she joined a classified task force tracking a bomb maker known only by the architect. A ghost who built devices for profit, for ideology, for art. Who treated every explosive as a message to the world and to the technicians trying to stop him. He'd killed 47 people in 3 countries. Maya had studied every photograph, every blast crater, every twisted remnant of his genius. She knew how he thought. And that's what terrified her most. The helicopter descended toward the bridge, an expanse of steel and concrete suspended over a 400-foot drop. From above, it looked peaceful, almost serene, sunlight glittering off the river below. But she could see the gridlock. Cars frozen mid-lane. People trapped. 200 civilians stranded because one man wanted to prove he was smarter than everyone else. She tightened the strap on her EOD suit. 85 pounds of Kevlar and ceramic. Claustrophobic, suffocating, but necessary. Her entire body was already sweating by the time her boots hit the metal platform. A police captain met her as she stepped off the helo. His face was pale, eyes red from stress. "Lieutenant Commander, we've cleared everyone within 500 meters except the vehicles still on the bridge. We can't move them. The device is wired to the suspension cables. Any weight change could trigger detonation." Maya nodded. "Show me the device. I need your structural engineers on a direct line. I want to know exactly how this bridge breathes." They moved along a narrow catwalk under the roadway, the sound of distant traffic replaced by the groaning hum of steel under tension. Through the grates above, she saw glimpses of terrified faces, parents holding children, people praying, eyes searching the horizon for rescue. She felt their fear as a physical weight pressing on her shoulders. It wasn't heroism that kept her moving. It was responsibility. The bomb came into view. 200 pounds of shaped C4 molded perfectly along a structural beam. Digital timer glowing red, 1734. The seconds slipped away like heartbeat echoes. She crouched, scanning every wire, every trigger point. Pressure release on the suspension cable, mercury tilt switch, cellular receiver, likely remote detonation backup. Her chest tightened. It was the architect's work, no question. The same arrogant complexity, the same quiet taunt built into every design. Catch me if you can. Command, this is Reeves on site, she said into her comm. Device confirmed military grade, multiple triggers, timer shows 17 minutes. Configuration matches architect's signatures. Beginning assessment. Copy Reeves. Be advised, possible suspect vehicle in pursuit 12 miles out. Van reported stolen from military depot. Could be your bomb maker. Her heart stopped for half a beat. He was nearby, watching, listening. The architect never planted his devices himself, but he always stayed close enough to observe. He studied failure the way other men studied art. If he knew she was here, he might already be waiting to see how she'd die. She steadied her breathing, focused on the circuits. He always designed with 3 layers: the obvious threat, the false solution, and the hidden truth. Cut the wire everyone expects you to cut, and you die. Ignore what seems irrelevant and you live, maybe. The red timer ticked down to 16 minutes. She examined the pressure release trigger. Clever. It monitored the bridge's tension through the main cable. If even a few vehicles moved off, the shift in weight would set it off. Physics as a hostage taker, but something didn't add up. The bridge was famous for swaying in the wind. Engineers had built dampers to control it, but slight vibration was constant. If this sensor were truly hypersensitive, it would have detonated already. The architect wouldn't make that mistake, unless he wanted her to think it was real. Her eyes flicked to the mercury tilt switch, also oddly angled, 15 degrees off level. That meant it couldn't function properly. Another bluff. A minute passed. She was sweating hard now, pulse pounding inside her helmet. She whispered under her breath, almost like a prayer, "You're arrogant, aren't you? You want me to see how smart you are." She studied him long enough to know. He was driven by ego, not ideology. He needed witnesses. He wanted to beat the best. Her voice crackled through the comms again. "Command, I'm identifying potential decoys. Architect's design pattern suggests psychological traps. I'm not engaging conventional." "Understood, Reeves. You have 15 minutes. 15 minutes, 200 people, one mind game." She closed her eyes for 2 seconds, tried to slow her breathing. She imagined her father's voice, the one she always heard before missions like this. "Courage isn't not being afraid, kiddo. It's function despite the fear." When she opened her eyes, the world sharpened. Every sound, every wire, every glint of solder. The architect's devices were never about the bomb itself. They were about the technician, about watching them choose wrong. So what would he never expect? Her gaze landed on the cellular receiver, a standard civilian module jury-rigged with cheap solder. It pulsed weakly, searching for signal. The battery feeding it also powered the timer and detonator circuit. One power source, 3 heavy drains. That was sloppy. No, not sloppy. Confident. He assumed the bomb would go off long before the battery failed. A dangerous assumption. She checked voltage with her probe, 11.8 volts. Healthy. The lead timer alone drew significant power. Add the cellular receiver staying connected to a network, and that battery was working overtime. If she could force it to work harder, maybe too hard. The idea hit like static, crazy, elegant, and against every manual she'd ever memorized. Don't defuse it, don't disarm it, starve it. She tapped her comm. "Command, I need airborne support with electromagnetic interference capability. Full spectrum jamming on the 850 MHz band." There was silence on the line. Then, "Reeves, that's an EC-130 compass call request. Range 140 miles. That jamming will knock out every cell in a 2-mile radius." "Do it." "Confirm this is part of your plan." It's the only plan that fits his arrogance. Her fingers shook slightly as she set her cutters near the detonator, just in case. She looked up for a moment through the steel lattice above her. Through the gaps she could see the cars, mothers, children, a man in a suit clutching the steering wheel, eyes closed, whispering something she couldn't hear. "Hold on," she murmured, "just hold on." Her comm clicked again. "Jammer inbound, ETA 90 seconds. 90 seconds. She could almost hear the architect's laughter in her head. What if she was wrong? What if the jamming triggered remote detonation? What if this entire theory was just another trap? Her throat tightened. She'd been scared before, but this felt different. Not fear of dying, fear of failing them. The 200 souls sitting above her, trusting someone they'd never meet. Her eyes returned to the glowing red numbers. 1003, 1002, 1001. She whispered softly, "You built your bomb to outthink people. You never planned for someone who'd stop thinking like you." The comm crackled. "Compass call on station. Jamming begins in 10 seconds. She counted with it. 9, 8, 7. The red digits glowed brighter. The receiver's light flickered madly. The device began drawing power like it was gasping for air. She exhaled once, calm, focused, determined. Whatever happened next, it would define her forever. And somewhere, miles away, a man known as the architect leaned over his radio receiver, watching his masterpiece flicker, realizing, maybe for the first time, that someone out there understood him better than he'd ever understood himself. The moment the jamming started, Maya felt it in her bones. A low hum vibrated through the air like distant thunder. The cellular receiver's tiny LED began to flicker erratically, once, twice, then glowed a steady, angry red. It was fighting back. "Command, jammer is active," she said, voice steady despite the heat pressing inside her suit. "Cellular receivers drawing max power, voltage at 11.8 dropping fast." She could almost hear her own pulse against the muffled static in her headset. Every second felt heavy, slow, deliberate. Above her, wind whipped across the bridge, rattling metal panels. She imagined the hundreds of people still trapped in their cars, watching the digital timer they couldn't see, unknowingly counting on a stranger beneath their feet. 11.2 volts. 10.8 volts. The battery was draining exactly as she'd hoped. "Battery life declining exponentially," she reported. "Projecting failure in 5 minutes. Timer shows 8 minutes. There was a pause, then the voice of her JSOC commander came through, low and cautious. "Reeves, if this doesn't work, you'll have less than 60 seconds for a secondary action." "I know. Do you have one?" "No," she said softly, "but I'll think of one." There was a brief silence on the channel. No one argued. They trusted her the way soldiers trust gravity, without question, because the alternative was unthinkable. Maya glanced again at the timer 0734. Sweat burned her eyes. Her breath echoed inside her helmet, every inhale amplified. Fear had its own rhythm, she thought. It crept in, gentle as static, then suddenly became all you could hear. She forced herself to breathe slower. Her father's words again, "Fear's just information. It tells you danger exists, nothing more." 10.4 volts. 9.8 volts. The light on the receiver flashed faster, desperate now, trying to stay connected. Somewhere the architect was realizing his masterpiece was losing signal strength. He would be packing, checking his monitor, cursing. And then he'd make a choice. Would he trigger manually, or wait to see if the system recovered? She didn't know, but the fact that it still hadn't gone off meant he was hesitating, and hesitation was oxygen. "Command, if he's monitoring, he'll know something's wrong," Maya warned. "Tell SWAT to be ready for a signal trace. He might try to re-establish control." "Copy that, Reeves. Triangulation team's already scanning for source." She adjusted her position on the catwalk, her gloved hands slick with sweat. The heat inside the EOD suit was unbearable now. Her neck felt like it was on fire. Still, she didn't move. Movement meant vibration. Vibration could mean death. 8.9 volts. The red digits on the timer began to dim slightly, barely noticeable, but it was happening. Her eyes narrowed. Come on, come on. Every second that passed was a lifetime. Every breath was a decision. She remembered the first time she'd lost someone, an EOD partner in Kabul. He followed the book perfectly, followed every step, every diagram, every procedure, and still died because the bomb hadn't read the same book. That's when she'd learned the hardest lesson. Sometimes the rule you obey is the one that kills you. 8.6 volts. Timer 4:23. The numbers wavered, glitching faintly. Her heart jumped. Command display flickering. Battery entering critical range. Copy that, Reeves. Maintain visual confirmation. She barely heard them. The world had shrunk to the faint electronic heartbeat in front of her. She whispered under her breath, "Physics doesn't care about arrogance." Then for a moment, silence. The timer blinked weakly. 8.4 volts. Her readings told her what she wanted to believe, that she'd just crossed the safe threshold. If she was right, the detonators couldn't fire below 8.5 volts. If she was wrong, the world would end in less than 3 minutes. She forced herself not to move, not to blink, not to breathe too fast. 8.1 volts. The timer was now orange, barely visible. 7.8 volts. 7.5. 6.9. Then darkness. The red glow vanished. The steady beep of the timer died mid-pulse. Silence. Maya froze. Her body refused to believe it. "Command," she whispered, "timer dark, voltage flatline." No explosion. No vibration. Nothing. Her hand trembled as she reached for her voltmeter. 0 power. She let out a long, trembling exhale. "Command, this is Reeves. Device is neutralized. Battery drain protocol successful. Bridge secure. Begin evacuation." For 3 long seconds there was nothing but static. Then the command channel erupted with cheers, disbelief, relief. "Copy that, Reeves. You just saved 200 lives." She didn't respond right away. Her breath hitched once, twice, then steadied. She stared at the dead device, cold, silent metal that had held the weight of a city's fear, and whispered, "You lose." Above her, sirens blared as police began moving vehicles. The bridge filled with motion again, families climbing out of cars, officers shouting, people hugging strangers they'd never met. Maya stayed kneeling by the device, her gloves resting on the metal beam. She couldn't move yet. She needed to be sure. The police captain approached, voice rough with emotion. That was, "I don't even have words. You just waited for the battery to die." Maya looked up, eyes tired but calm. "Sometimes patience is the most dangerous weapon you have." He nodded, but she could see the question behind his eyes, the one everyone had when they saw a miracle that made no sense. "How did you know that would work?" She didn't answer, because the truth wasn't something you could explain quickly. You couldn't tell someone that you won because you thought like a killer. Her radio crackled again. "Reeves, we've traced the signal. Apartment complex 3 miles out. SWAT en route." She was already on her feet. "I'm coming with them." "Negative," Command said sharply. "You've done your part." "No," she replied, voice quiet but absolute. "Not until I see his face." 10 minutes later, she was back in the helicopter, stripped of her EOD suit but still wearing the sweat like armor. The city blurred beneath her, 1,000 rooftops, 1,000 stories that almost ended. As the helo banked east, she thought about what might come next. The architect, if intelligence was right, wasn't just another bomber. He was something else entirely, a man addicted to intellect, obsessed with control, and people like that didn't lose quietly. The pilot's voice broke through the headset. Approaching target building, SWAT in position. Maya watched from the window as armored vehicles encircled a gray apartment complex. A dozen operators took positions, silent and precise. Thermal shows one subject at a desk, a voice said over the radio. Possible electronics. Maya grabbed her vest and sidearm. I'll clear any devices before breach. The commander gave her a hard look. You sure you want to see him? I've seen his mind. Might as well meet the body. On the signal, the door exploded inward. Clear left, clear right. Maya entered last. The room smelled of solder, dust, and coffee. Workbench cluttered with tools, wires, screens still glowing with schematics. At the center sat a man in his 40s, thin, sharp-eyed, expression unreadable. He looked up and smiled faintly. Lieutenant Commander Reeves, the battery drain was elegant. I didn't think you'd see it. Maya kept her weapon steady. You're under arrest for murder and terrorism. He tilted his head. Murder, yes. Terrorism, no. That bridge was art. I built the most complex device on American soil. You turned it into entropy. Her jaw clenched. You call killing art? He smiled again, eyes bright with a sick kind of pride. Every genius seeks an equal. You might be mine. She stared at him for a long, cold moment. You're not a genius. You're a coward who hides behind wires. SWAT cuffed him, leading him away. But he kept talking, voice echoing in her head long after. You'll think about me. Every time you cut a wire, every time you make a choice, because I made you question the rules. When he was gone, she exhaled slowly. For a second, her knees almost gave way. She looked around the room, his devices, his notes, his chaotic brilliance. Then she found something taped above his desk, a simple handwritten quote. Perfection is not safety. It's the illusion of control. It stopped her, because she realized he wasn't wrong, just twisted. Hours later, back at the command post, someone handed her a cup of water. Her hands were still trembling. She didn't even try to hide it. Fear wasn't weakness. It was proof she was still alive. Outside, the city was returning to normal, news crews filming, reporters talking about heroism, miracle, genius. But Maya knew better. It wasn't genius. It was survival, and survival rarely looked heroic from the inside. She sat in silence for a long time, eyes on the distant bridge lit by flashing lights. The wind carried faint sounds, sirens, engines, laughter, crying. She closed her eyes and whispered. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. The architect had built his masterpiece to prove he couldn't be beaten. And Maya Reeves had proven that arrogance, no matter how brilliant, always underestimates humility. The classroom was silent, except for the faint hum of the projector. Maya Reeves stood at the front of the lecture hall at the Naval Postgraduate School, hands folded loosely behind her back, eyes fixed on the image glowing on the screen. A bridge, a timer, and a single red number frozen forever at 00000. Fear, she said quietly, doesn't disappear, it evolves. 85 EOD students sat before her, their notebooks open, pens unmoving. Most were younger than she'd been on the bridge. Some were barely out of college. They looked at her the way people look at legends, as if the story they'd heard couldn't possibly belong to someone breathing the same air. She hated that look. Everyone thinks the hardest part is the timer, she continued. It is. The hardest part is the silence before it stops. That silence feels like judgment. No one spoke. She let the weight of the words settle before continuing. The architect's device was designed to punish obedience. Every rule in the manual was a trap, and for years that made me angry that someone could turn order into a weapon. But that's what fear does when you don't understand it. It rewrites the rules in your head. She paused, studying their faces. Some leaned forward, others avoided her gaze. One young lieutenant raised a hand hesitantly. Ma'am, why isn't that battery drain method standard protocol? Wouldn't it save lives? Maya smiled faintly, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes. Because it only works when arrogance builds the device. It's not a rule, it's a reminder. Every bomb maker is human, and humans don't build perfection, they build patterns. My job isn't to memorize solutions, it's to recognize psychology. The class scribbled furiously. She waited until the scratching of pens faded. The key lesson, she said softly, isn't about voltage or circuitry. It's about humility. Every bomb you face will try to convince you you're in control. You're not. You're borrowing time from chaos, that's all. For a moment she stared at the photo again. The bridge, the sunlight, the ghost of that day that still lived in her bones. After the lecture, she stayed behind to organize her notes. The students filed out quietly, whispering to each other about the protocol, the name they'd given it. She hated that too. It made it sound like strategy instead of desperation. When the last of them left, a familiar voice came from the back of the room. Still turning trauma into curriculum, I see. Maya turned. Captain Wei, her former commanding officer. He looked older now, more gray at the temples, but his eyes hadn't changed. Steady, unreadable. You could retired after that bridge, he said. Medal of Valor, press coverage, textbook named after you. Why are you still teaching? She closed her binder. Because medals don't make the next technician smarter, lessons do. Nodded slowly, stepping closer. JSOC's forming a new counter-IED task force, forward operating analysis team, before the bombs are built, not after. They want you on it. She hesitated. Why me? Because you see patterns in people, not just circuits. We need that. Her gaze drifted back to the frozen image on the screen. The bridge again. She could almost hear the hum of that battery dying, the quiet heartbeat of 1,000 lives she didn't know. When do I start? She asked. Tomorrow, he said. We're calling it Task Force Paladin. You'll analyze bomb signatures, hunt makers before deployment. She exhaled slowly, almost relieved. Action was easier than memory. Tomorrow, then. 6 months later, she was standing under the blinding Afghan sun, sand swirling around her boots, the world humming with heat. Task Force Paladin wasn't like any unit she'd known. They didn't wait for the explosion, they chased the architects of fear themselves. Her call sign was Ghost. It fit too well. She'd become a rumor among EOD teams, the one who beat the unbeatable bomb. But reputation didn't stop nightmares. Sometimes, in the stillness before dawn, she'd wake to phantom ticking, the red digits of the timer glowing in her mind. She'd lie there, listening to the hum of generators, telling herself, you survived that once. You'll survive this too. On her third deployment, she found herself mentoring a young tech petty officer. 22, freckles, too many questions, not enough fear. He reminded her of herself 7 years ago. He caught her one evening while she was cleaning her tools. Ma'am, he asked quietly, were you scared on that bridge? The way he said scared, like it was something shameful, made her look up. Absolutely, she said without hesitation, terrified. He blinked, surprised. You didn't look scared. That's because I was working, she said. The fear doesn't go away, you just function despite it. He frowned. But how do you decide what to do when you're that scared? Maya looked at the sand stretching endlessly outside the tent. The horizon shimmered like it was burning. Fear is information, she said. It tells you danger exists, but it doesn't tell you what to do about it. Training fills that gap. When you're scared, your body screams run. Your training whispers think. You listen to the whisper. He nodded slowly, absorbing it like doctrine. The instructors say you're teaching something called adaptive threat psychology, he said. What's that mean? Maya smiled a little. It means we stop treating bombs like puzzles and start treating them like conversations. Every device tells you something about its maker, what scares them, what they admire, what they overestimate. The architect's bombs were elegant because he was proud of his elegance. His arrogance was his flaw, Every bomb maker has one. She could see the thought sinking into his mind, the same idea that had saved her life, that even genius had fingerprints if you looked close enough. He hesitated before asking the question she knew was coming. "Ma'am, what if I freeze? What if I'm not smart enough to figure it out like you did?" Maya set down her tool and turned to face him fully. "Then you ask for help. You don't have to be you just have to be thorough, disciplined, and honest about what you don't know." She took a slow breath, choosing her words carefully. "That day on the bridge, I wasn't brave, I was desperate. I'd studied the architect for 2 years, I knew his patterns, his arrogance. You won't always have that advantage. What you will have is a team. Use them, trust them. Don't let ego make you think you can do it alone." He looked down, fidgeting with the strap of his vest. "But what if my instincts are wrong?" Maya nodded. "Then you live with the outcome. That's the job. Perfection isn't the goal. Survival is. Survive so you can make better decisions tomorrow." The young tech smiled weakly, as if relief and fear had mixed into something almost peaceful. "Thanks, ma'am. That helps." When he left, the tent fell quiet again. Maya sat there for a long time, staring at the unfinished maintenance log. The lantern above flickered once, twice, like the timer had that day, and her chest tightened. She still didn't know if she believed what she told her students. That survival was enough. Because sometimes survival meant carrying the memory of what didn't happen, the explosion that could have ended everything, the faces that might have vanished if she'd been 1 second slower. She thought of the architect again, Doctor. He was sitting in a solitary cell somewhere in Colorado now, probably staring at blank walls, building bombs in his imagination. But even from 1,000 miles away, she could still feel his shadow. He once told her, "You'll think about me every time you cut a wire." And he'd been right, but not for the reason he imagined. She thought about him not as an enemy, but as a study in fragility. A man so brilliant he couldn't stand being ordinary, so he built beauty out of death. She wondered if that same flaw lived in her somewhere, that need to prove herself through danger. Sometimes when she caught her reflection in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. Calm eyes, stillness that felt unnatural, ghost. The nickname had stopped being a call sign, it had become a description. Outside, the night deepened. The desert wind moved softly against the canvas walls. She sat down on her cot, pulled out her field journal, and wrote 3 words on the blank page. "Arrogance creates vulnerability." She closed the notebook, turned off the light, and lay in darkness. The silence was heavy but not empty. Tomorrow she would teach again. Tomorrow she would remind another group of young techs that courage wasn't loud, and genius wasn't safe. Because the truth she'd learned on that bridge, the one no textbook could teach, was this: even the enemy believes their perfection protects them. And that belief is the easiest wire to cut. The desert air was cold before dawn, that strange kind of stillness that makes you think the world is holding its breath. Maya Reeves stood alone outside the task force Paladin compound, coffee cooling in her hand, watching the horizon shift from violet to gold. The war never really slept. It just waited for the next sound, the next signal, the next life balanced on a wire. She'd been here for 6 months now, the same canvas walls, the same smell of fuel and sand. Some mornings she wondered if she was still the woman who'd stood beneath the bridge. Other mornings, she wasn't sure she wanted to be. Behind her the compound stirred, radios crackled, helicopters spun up. Somewhere a generator coughed itself awake. Another day, another mission. Captain approached quietly, his boots crunching against the gravel. "We've got chatter," he said. "New device found outside, similar circuitry to work. You should see it." Maya nodded, her mind already tightening around the problem. The architect had been in prison for a year now, 23-hour solitary confinement at ADX Florence. But his designs, they were still multiplying like echoes, students of his work, copycats chasing his legend. Inside the operations tent, the photos were laid out on the table, close-up images of a small, intricate explosive built into a generator casing. Maya bent over them. The craftsmanship was crude compared to, but the logic was familiar, too familiar. Same psychological layering, she murmured. Decoy fuses, redundant triggers. Whoever built this studied his devices. Exhaled slowly. You think he's teaching from inside? Maybe not directly, she said, but his ideas are contagious, and ideas don't stay in prison. She stared at the image for a long time, then straightened. Let's find the mind, not the bomb. Later that night, she sat alone in her small workspace, lit only by a flickering desk lamp. The compound outside was quiet now, only the distant hum of a drone somewhere overhead. Her laptop screen glowed with an encrypted message, just received from stateside intelligence. Subject HOL MARCUS, Behavioral Status Update. Continues writing theoretical blueprints for devices. No communication privileges. Material confiscated weekly. Claims his art lives on through those who study him. She read the last line twice. Lives on through those who study him. That was what he'd always wanted to be remembered, even through imitation. She closed the laptop. The light died, leaving only her reflection in the darkened screen. Sometimes she wondered if she'd helped him achieve exactly that. By beating him, she'd made him famous. By surviving him, she'd kept him alive in stories. She stood and crossed to the mirror, removing the scarf from her neck. A faint scar still traced along her collarbone, an old injury from a near miss years before. She touched it absently. Fear leaves marks, she thought, not all of them visible. She whispered into the silence, "You're forgotten, you just don't know it yet." A week later, Task Force Paladin was deployed on a classified mission near the Pakistani border. A joint op with local units. Intelligence pointed to a new bomb maker known only as a ghost inheriting the architect's philosophy. The objective, capture not kill. The convoy moved at dawn, engines whispering against the still air. The landscape rolled out endless and empty, a wash of red earth and low fog. Inside her MRAP, Maya checked her equipment, bomb probe, fiber camera, sensor unit. Her heart rate steady, her breathing controlled. Fear was there, as always, the quiet companion that never left, but she'd learned to let it ride in the passenger seat instead of the driver. They reached a half-collapsed farmhouse near the river bend. Intelligence said operated from here, building training devices for recruits. The team spread out, silent and methodical. Maya entered first, sidearm drawn. Dust hung in the air like mist. On the tables, circuits, wires, diagrams, and something else, a photograph taped to the wall. She stepped closer. It was a picture of the bridge. Below it, handwritten words, "Perfection is not safety." Her breath caught, the same phrase had taped above his desk. So this was it, his legacy, recycled and misunderstood. Another mind chasing significance through destruction. But this one was different, younger, sloppier. Her radio clicked. "Reeves, we found him, back room." She moved carefully through a narrow doorway. A boy no older than 20 sat at a workbench, frozen by flashlight beams. He dropped his soldering iron and raised his hands. His voice shook. "Don't shoot, I just build what they tell me." Maya lowered her weapon slightly. "Who gave you those designs?" "They come online," he said, trembling. "Everyone knows the architect, he's a legend. We copy his work to learn to be good at it." Good, the word made her sick. She took a slow breath. "Do you even know what that bridge was, what almost happened?" He shook his head. "They said it was genius." "No," she said quietly. "It was desperation and arrogance, you're copying failure." His eyes darted to the wall, to the picture of the bridge. "But he beat everyone, except you." Her voice softened. "He didn't beat anyone, he killed strangers for validation. That's not genius. That's emptiness dressed as brilliance. The boy's eyes filled with tears. He wasn't a monster, she realized. Just another mind seduced by complexity, by the illusion that intellect alone could make meaning. She signaled for the team. Take him, secure all materials. As they led him out, Maya turned once more to the photograph on the wall. The sunlight in the picture glinted off the bridge cables, almost beautiful, almost peaceful. She pulled it down, folded it once, and slipped it into her vest pocket. Back at the base, the sun was setting again, the same quiet orange that had followed her for years. She sat on a small bench outside her tent, watching dust drift through the light. Petty officer approached, helmet under his arm. "Heard you found the new guy," he said softly. "The one copying's work." Maya nodded. "Do you think there'll always be another one?" he asked. She looked toward the horizon. "Probably. Evil doesn't end, it just changes handwriting." He was quiet for a while, then said, "If it keeps changing, how do we ever win?" Maya smiled faintly, eyes tired but gentle. "We don't win by ending evil. We win by ending arrogance, by reminding people that intellect without empathy destroys itself." He nodded slowly. "So that's the lesson." She shook her head. "No, the lesson is simpler. Understand people, even the ones you fight, because if you can understand them, you can outthink them, and maybe even stop them before they begin." Hesitated, then asked, "Do you ever think about that bridge?" Maya's eyes flickered toward the folded photo in her pocket. "Every day," she said. "Not because of what almost happened, but because of what didn't. It reminds me that fear isn't the enemy. Pride is." He gave a small, respectful nod and walked away, leaving her alone with the twilight. The wind shifted, carrying the faint smell of smoke and rain, the kind of scent that always came before a storm. She closed her eyes and let it wash over her. Somewhere in Colorado, sat in his cell, another morning, another endless hour. The world had already moved on. His name was fading from headlines, his work dissected and dismantled by the very people he'd tried to outsmart. He once told her, "You'll remember me." And she did, not as a nemesis, but as a warning. A reminder that brilliance without humility collapses under its own weight. Months later, back in the States, Maya walked through the halls of the Naval EOD Training Center. She passed a classroom where new recruits sat studying circuit diagrams. On the whiteboard, someone had written in block letters, "Reeves Protocol, Adaptive Threat Response." She stopped at the doorway, unseen, listening as the instructor spoke. "The Reeves Protocol isn't about batteries," he said. "It's about understanding arrogance. The moment you believe your enemy's smarter than you, you stop thinking. The moment you think you're smarter than them, you stop listening. Either way, you lose." Maya smiled quietly, then walked on. She didn't correct him. He'd captured the truth. Outside, the late afternoon light was warm on her face. A group of young techs jogged past, laughing, carefree in the brief moment between drills. She watched them go, a faint ache blooming in her chest, pride and sorrow braided together. She'd spent her whole career diffusing weapons. What she hadn't realized until now was that she'd also been learning to diffuse people. Their fear, their arrogance, their illusions of control. As she reached the end of the walkway, she stopped to look out over the bay. The water shimmered gold, the same color it had been that morning, years ago, when the call first came. She took a long, slow breath. The tide shifted below, steady and unbothered, as if reminding her that the world keeps moving with or without explosions. For the first time in years, she let herself smile. Because she finally understood, survival isn't just living through the blast, it's learning to live after it. And as the wind carried the faint hum of distant waves, her voice, quiet, steady, certain, rose into the air like a prayer no one else could hear. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak.